How's it going? So my name is Nathan Duck, but here on the internet I go by Ducky3D, and this is the face you're going to be tired of looking at by the end of the course, because I'll be teaching it. Short intro. So for the past couple years, I've been freelancing, doing a lot of concert visuals for a lot of DJs, specifically in the EDM world. So I loved working with those guys, making LED screen visuals, very sci-fi looking, very abstract and glowy and crazy. I have a YouTube channel, which is kind of my biggest gig, where I make Blender tutorials, and then I also create a bunch of courses, some tools for 3D artists, just kind of making stuff, giving back to that community. So if you're watching this and have never used Blender before, that's cool. That's why I made this course. I made it for people who don't know how to use Blender. We're gonna have an intro, and I'm just really gonna, in a way, hold your hand through this process. We're gonna learn 3 really cool projects, and by the end of it, you're gonna really have a gauge. You're gonna realize, hey, 3D isn't that crazy. It is crazy, but it's not that crazy. When I got into 3D, it became almost an addiction. Like, it was so fun. 3D was so fun. And then I started working with really cool clients. I started being able to charge more because it's such a crazy specialized skill. But of course, I'm a biased source. So I wanted to ask my friend Peyton Abear, who just recently started Blender and has added it to his skill set, and it's really changed his career. So this is a clip of me asking that question so he can tell you guys his personal experience.
Hot take. Learning Blender, learning 3D, like with my career, I got to the point where I kind of maxed out my skills in Premiere and After Effects, or I felt like I maxed out my skills. And for me, the big disconnect was not being able to create things that were custom tailored to my clients, to my projects. So being able to like garner those skills and create things that are absolutely tailored to what you're working on was the biggest thing that made me feel like 3D became worth it, because like generating custom assets, it just elevates your work so much more. Yeah, apart from that, I think that learning 3D across the board is great for those who, let's say like you don't have a camera, all you have is a computer. You can practice all of your photography skills, like composition and framing and lighting, all for free in one program. If you're pre-visualizing, for a storyboard, you can put all these assets together roughly to get an idea. If you're not that good of a drawer, you can, download all kinds of assets for free off of, a couple different websites and throw them in there and see how they interact and, get a rough idea of how you want a final product to look. And then there's the part where it's like the big snowball of everything, where you can just design something from the ground up that doesn't even exist and take that and add it to your shot.
All right, so creating this course for someone who's never used Blender before. Now, if you are comfortable with Blender, you've used Blender before, this particular lesson you won't need. This is the how to use Blender lesson. So let's dive straight into that. So I provided a startup file. Now at the beginning of new lessons, we're going to use this. If we ever start a new lesson and there's nothing there, like a blank scene, use the startup file. It's going to have the correct settings for you. Now, if you don't have Blender downloaded at all, let me show you how to do that. So what you'll do is hop on over to blender.org. Now the current build is 3.2. Now, whenever you're watching this course and there's a newer build, that doesn't matter. Everything in this course is, you can do new versions and old versions. What you'll do is you'll just download Blender and go ahead and just install it. And once you have that installed, go ahead and double click the startup file right here. So using the startup file will get you around having to figure out, okay, what are all the settings? What are the proper settings that I need to have? They're all right here, all done for you, just what you need. First step, how do you navigate Blender? How do you move things around? So, very important. If you don't have a mouse, get a mouse. I'm just gonna say a mouse is a requirement for the course. You need to have a mouse with 3D because you're working with XYZ, you're working with those 3 axes in a 3D space. So having 2 buttons on a laptop just isn't going to work. Blender has created itself to be able to work with Blender, like right over here. You can just kind of navigate with this and move around this, and you can zoom in with that. Now you can use that when you have a laptop, but it's going to get annoying and it's going to slow you down. So just go ahead and get a mouse if you don't have one. So in this startup file, middle mouse click to move around just like this. That is how you're going to want to do that. Now, if you want to drag, hold down shift and middle mouse click. How do you get around that if you don't have a 3-button mouse? So you go up here to your edit, in your preferences, and this goes for PC and Mac users. So right over here, go to input and you'll see keyboard and mouse. Go ahead and click emulate number pad, and that's so you can use the numbers up top, because I believe you use different numbers, it'll do different views. I don't think we'll use that much in the course, but really important, emulate 3-button mouse. And what that's going to allow you to use is a button to use it instead. So if you are on Mac, you can actually right here, you'll see a thing that says OS key, or you can actually click it and pick the key you want to use for that feature. So now, if we X out of this, instead of using my middle, so you notice I'm using the middle, now I'm going to hold down Alt. So since I'm on PC, it's going to be Alt. So now I'm going to click and click Alt. It's going to go around. I'll hold down Shift and Alt, and I can click and drag. So if you really don't want to use your 3-button mouse or can't get one, you are not out of luck, and you can go ahead and use it just like that. So right down here, you're going to see this little key map thing. That is going to be kind of a reference, just in case I missed something. I'm going to be doing my absolute best to kind of make sure I'm talking about everything I click, everything I touch, so you don't get confused, you don't get lost being someone who hasn't used Blender before. So use this down here as a reference. So back to what I was saying. So your computer is going to have a CPU and hopefully a GPU. If it doesn't have a GPU, that's okay. But you need to turn those on. So what you'll do is here, you're going to edit, and your preferences, go here to system, and this is where it's going to tell you where what do you have available to use. So if you just have a CPU, use that and use CUDA, or just use CUDA or none if that's kind of default. But use CUDA if you are able to use CUDA. And if you have an RTX graphics card, use OptiX. That's going to make everything even better, but stick to CUDA if you don't have that. And then again, you're going to want to turn on this stuff. So I'm going to go to OptiX and then turn on my NVIDIA and my CPU. So this is GPU, this is CPU. So turn your stuff on, and then if you have nothing, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, use CUDA with just your CPU. I believe if you're going to be on Mac, you may only be able to access your CPU. If you're on a PC, you should be able to use both, but I believe some Macs allow you to use both. But again, if you have an RTX card, go ahead and jump on that OptiX. OptiX is going to use that RTX technology. Okay, so let's go ahead and add an object into our scene. Shift A. So what you want to do is click Shift A. So like that, just kind of Shift A, and you can let go of the keyboard too. Like Shift A, let go. You still have that navigation, but it can go away. So Shift A. Right here on Mesh, let's just go ahead and put an icosphere in here. All right, so here's what I want to show you. How do we move this guy? We don't know how to move this guy. Well, right over here is where you're going to do that. Now this can go away. You can accidentally minimize it. Just hit that button right there. It'll come back. So click this button here, and that's going to be your move tool. So you can move it here, and you can move it here, and you can move it around if you click that middle one right there. So if you click the middle one, you can kind of freehand it if you want. Rotation, this is your rotate, just like that. Just kind of rotate it around and have a grand old time. This is your scale tool. You can scale it up that way, and you could scale it out that way, and then you could scale it wide that way. There you go. And then if you want all of them together, you can click the transform button. So you have rotation, you have your movement, and you have your scale. Now, those are cool, especially if you're on a laptop, you're going to want to use those. But there are shortcuts to those things which we are going to be using in this course, these really basic movements. So if you want to rotate your object, hit R, just like that. And if you want to have more control over the rotation, hit R twice. So you pop it twice, and then you can move it around however you want. Scale, just hit S, just like that. And of course, if you want to scale it on a particular axis, like the X-axis, the Y-axis, or the Z-axis, hit SY, and then it'll scale it on that axis, or SZ, scale it on the Z-axis. That looks like the same exact thing. SY, so that'll kind of scale, but it's rotated funny. Let me go ahead and zero it out. So like SY, it'll scale it out that way, and then SZ, scale it out that way. So you can have that kind of control. So S, scale, R, rotate, and then G, move it, just like that. And then of course we can use these, and you can access all of those right over here. So you have that control. That's kind of the basics. So recap here: shift, middle click, move around, middle click, world, and then you can click on this object, hit G, and just kind of move them around. Have a grand old time. Scroll wheel can zoom. Let me show you something very helpful. This is going to save you a lot of a headache. Say you're over here and then you mess something up. Sometimes you can go berserk. If you lose control of your scene, you don't know where to go back, hit the period key. First, we'll click on an object. So click this object where you want to be the center, and then click period. Just go ahead, do that, and now your world is going to rotate around it. So say there's an object that's way over here. You want that to be kind of the center point of the particular place you're working. Hit period. Now it's going to go around that. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit G to move him back to where I want him, and I'm going to hit the period key. There we go. We're back to where we want to be. Now I'm going to mention the tilde key. I'm going to use the tilde key quite a bit in this this course. If you don't know what the tilde key is, it's that button right above the tab key. It's got like this apostrophe thing and this squiggle. That's going to bring up a pie menu. We're going to use top a lot. So if I want to look at this top right here, but I don't want to be, I want it to be completely flat. In a sense, what we're looking through is a lens, and I forget how to change that, but we're essentially looking at a lens. So there is a slight amount of fisheye, very subtle. Well, tilde key top, no fisheye. It is completely perfectly flat. We are looking at the very top. So tilde key top. So we can also go tilde key front, left, right, bottom, top, left. But again, tilde key, that gives you control. Then you can zoom out, hit G, and move it around however you want, just like this. Now, if I'm going too fast, I highly recommend rewatching this. Even if I'm going slow, rewatch this particular lesson and get the practice down now. This will save you from probably getting angry. 3D is crazy. So get comfortable with this particular video. Get comfortable with navigating Blender. I'm going to hit the middle mouse click and go down here. So that's how you do that. That's the tilde key. Now, one very important thing. If you're on a laptop and you're pulling your hair out, you potentially may need to turn on Emulate Number Pad. So go to Edit, Preferences, go to Input, and turn on Emulate Numpad. If you don't have a number pad, you're going to want to do that so you can use the numbers like you're on Emulate Numpad. So just click that if you're on a laptop. That's going to save you a little bit of a headache, especially if you don't have sort of a full-fledged keyboard on your computer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple more objects in here. Don't follow along here. Just kind of see what I'm doing. I have a bunch of objects here. I want to see, in a way, in a form, in a way, what's everything in my scene. It's going to be right up here. It's going to be called your outliner. This is the outliner world. So say I click on this one, that is that one. Click on this one, it's there. This is your outliner. If you're trying to select a specific object, it's going to happen a lot in 3D. You want to find a specific object, but you have too many scenes. Well, you can go over here and find it, and if you double click, you can rename it. So this is the outliner. Remember it, use it. We're going to use it quite a bit. This is going to be one of your best friends when trying to navigate your viewport and your scene. Now, another thing you're going to want to know. So there are going to be lights in the scene. So what you'll do, go ahead and follow along here, hit Shift A, scroll down here and add a point light. And I'm going to hit G and move it up here. We added a light to the scene. I'm not going to show you how to turn on the light. It's already on, but don't worry about it. When you want to go ahead and change the brightness of your light, or you want to change the color of your light, right over here is going to be what you're going to want to use. So in case I forget to mention it throughout the scene, if we're editing the component of a light, go over here, right here, boom, click that. Now you can change the power, the brightness, and you can go ahead and change the color. And if you want an exact color, this goes for adding materials, which I'll show in a second. You can paste hex codes right here, or you can add exact HSV, RGB values. Now, go ahead and follow along with this. Right up here, go to this little button. That's going to be called Viewport Shading. This is a button that gives you a very quick way to show. So what it's going to do is going to cast some light onto your objects so you can see them. Go over here. When we add materials to this scene, you're going to want to be here. This is the material button. So let's go ahead and click new. Now we added a material right here. This is the name of that material. You can double click it and call it metal. I'm going to just call it met for metal. So here we go. We have this metal, and this is your selection. This is how you change the metal. So say, hey, bring this over. Now it's metallic. Now it's really shiny with the roughness. And now it's blue. We have a blue metal in our scene. This is where you're going to want to do that. Now, there's one more thing right over here that we're going to use. It's called modifiers. That's going to be over here, right? It's also going to be right over here. Click that and just go ahead and just hit this button for this drop down and click a simple deform and then just slide that angle up. There we go. Now we've manipulated our object. So there we go. So this part I just want to make sure, if you're confused as to what over here I'm doing, make sure you see where this is clicked, like world brightness or the transform where you can kind of rotate. All that stuff is in this section right here. Down here is your timeline. You can go ahead and drag it up a little bit, but this is your timeline. This shows you how long your scene is going to be. You can press play, you can press pause, you can go backwards, but you can see these numbers. That's how many frames we're looking at. And right over here is your end frame. So we're starting at frame 1 and you're ending at 250 frames. Blender by default, which is in the startup file I provided, it is going to be 24 frames a second. In this whole course, we're going to be working with 24 frames a second. But if you happen to want to change that, and I'll show you that on their export settings of the show, not the show, sorry, the course. I call it a show. It's going to be called output properties. It looks like a printer. And right here, you can change your frame rate, but don't worry about it. Here, if you want to make it 500 frames, you can. Just type in 500, and then right over here, just drag it up. That is your timeline. There's another thing is these workspaces up here. We're going to use the shading workspace. And what you're going to want to do is just go ahead and click that. I'm going to mention the shading workspace, and I'll walk you through it. These are nodes. This is the node version, if we go over here, of this. You can see when I change specular, it changes it on the left as well. So that is the node workspace. And you can navigate it similar to navigating this. Here, you just middle click and drag instead of holding down shift, but you can also hold down shift. You want middle click and drag. Scroll wheel, you can find it, and say he's gone. You don't know where it is. Just hit the period key, and he should come back, but make sure he is selected. Period key, he'll come back. So same way over here, I lost track of it, period key. Or otherwise, if you open up the shader editor, which is right here, the shading editor, and you can't see it, just scroll wheel, zoom out, and then you find it, and you can zoom back in. To add a node, you'll hit Shift A. You can add like a shader, click emission, and then click again. And then you can also use G to move a move a node around. You can click it, you can use G, and then if you want to drag something in, you go ahead and pull right here in that, and put it right in there, and it's going to say don't do that. But that is how you use the node system. We're going to slightly touch the node system, but that is how you use the nodes. There's also going to be the UV editing section here too. You can see my UVs. Layout is the default. If you ever accidentally hit one, just go up here, click layout. You'll be back in your default work setup. Now that's it for this intro lesson, how to use Blender. You're ready. I would go ahead and rewatch this 1 or 2 more times just to make sure you're comfortable so you can kind of know what to expect for the remainder of this course. But with that being said, on to the next. Now there's 2 add-ons that you need to have to follow this course. The first one comes with Blender by default. So go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. Right here, type in Node, and you're going to see something called the Node Wrangler. Now in the course, you'll see me use it. Just go ahead and hit the checkbox on that. That's going to be super, super important for you to have the Node Wrangler add-on. There's one other add-on that you're going to need. Now I'm going to hit the letter N. It's going to pull this up. You're going to need this add-on right here. It's called Real-Time Materials. I'm not going to have you learn how to make node-based materials, but I still want you to have them for this course. So I'm giving you a pack. So what you're going to want to do is go to ducky3d.com. So once you're there, this is my website. I have a couple products. So what you're going to want to do is go here to Store, and and this is free. Go to Real-Time Materials Free. I have a full pack, which has 270 materials. I created a free pack, if you want to test them out, with 40 free materials. So go ahead and click that, and then click this button. It's going to navigate you to Gumroad, where the file is actually housed. So just go ahead and click 0 for $0, and then click I want this, put in your information, and download that pack. So once you've downloaded the pack, we're going to go ahead and click install. Now, if you're on a Mac, Mac is going to unzip that file for you. Make sure that when you get that file, you zip it back up, or if you just have a standalone zip file, leave it. That's where you're going to be having that. That's where that file. So what you're going to want is to have a file that says Real-Time Materials Free, just a finished zip file. Just go ahead and double click that, click install add-on. I've already got it installed, and so I'm going to type in Real-Time Materials. I'm going to uncheck the full version, and we're going to click on the free version. That's all you're going to need to do. And now you're going to have access. You'll hit this drop down. You'll see all these different materials. You'll have access to these pre-made, really cool materials. So that's important to have that. We are going to be using it. We're definitely going to be using these surfaces right here. Some of the metal, we're going to be using this galvanized steel. Those are materials I created. Those are free for you, and we're going to be using them in this course. Now that's it for this intro lesson, how to use Blender. You're ready. I would go ahead and rewatch this 1 or 2 more times just to make sure you're comfortable, so you can kind of know what to expect for the remainder of this course. But with that being said, on to the next. All right, so we need to go here to the Real-Time Materials tab right here, and that's going to be in the In panel. So if you hit the letter In, it's going to pull up and shows like screencast keys, which is showing my little thing. And by little thing, I mean mouse, which is showing my mouse. And then also we have the material add-on. So what you want to do is go over here and click on surfaces. In fact, actually, let's go ahead and use the metallic one. We'll see how that goes. So click on galvanized steel, click on your model and add material. And just because we're using the Eevee engine, it's going to take longer to apply. If you're using the Cycles engine, it would apply immediately. But again, it's going to take just a second to load in. All right, so mine took quite a bit to actually load in, but now we have our object here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little icon here. So click on your model, click on the material icon, and right here where it says shape, type in like 200. Notice now we have that galvanized pattern. Let's see. Do we need to apply scale? So do we need to apply scale? Yes. Okay. So with your model, go ahead and hit Control A and apply scale and bring this down to like 50, something more practical. Because our object was so small when we started with it and we scaled it up, and everything, all the materials also apply proportionally. If that doesn't make any sense, that's okay, but that's just what's happening. So we have to actually apply that scale. So me looks like maybe 30. There we go. That looks about practical. And then what you can do, maybe hit your middle click here and just move it down. So see where the light's interacting with it. You can actually see how roughness is working. So you have these 2 roughness bars. And what that's going to do is show how much roughness you're in the scene. So right now, no roughness. It's practically a bumpy mirror. So what you do is you bring up the roughness here, and you can see how the roughness is interacting with this scene. And then you can meet the other portion of the roughness. And then right here is the scale of the roughness. So if you want it to be smaller, which just looks bad, or if you want it to be bigger, which looks better. So it looks like it's about 5, and then you can just kind of bring this up till it's just shiny enough. For me, this looks like a good metal. So now we have a good galvanized steel. Now, if you don't like this, you can go to any of the other ones. Maybe like the surfaces, and we'll click on that. We'll click this one and add that material. Again, it's going to take a hot second to apply, especially depending on the computer you have. We're previewing this in Eevee, so they take a while to actually calculate. Again, if we're using Cycles, it's instantaneous. All right, and now we have a different material. If you can see, it has these little surface bumps, and it's really fun. Again, we have those roughness controls. If you just bring this down on that slider, you'll notice it looks way more interesting and way more cool. So now we have this. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and click on, I'm gonna play with my roughness scale. go ahead and click on your object, hit R and then X and then the numbers 9, 0. What that did is R initiates the rotation. So if I click on this and hit R and move my mouse, it'll rotate it. X meaning rotate it on the X axis. And then I clicked 90. That's going to be my 90 degrees. So what's cool is say like, hey, I want to double the scale of this object. Hit S and click 2. That scaled it by 2. Or R2, that rotated it by 2 degrees. Fun little shortcuts. This Blender lives and dies by the shortcut. If you're big on shortcuts, you're going to love Blender because Blender is full of them. With that being said, let's go ahead and continue with this. We're going to need a black background for this, and we're going to do it a hacky way, kind of a weird way. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to hit Shift A, click on a plane right here, go to Mesh, Shift A, Mesh, Plane. I'm going to hit RX 90 again, right over here. Click on the Move tool and move it back pretty far. Hit your scroll wheel and just move out, and then move it back. And then I'm going to hit S and drag my mouse. So we want this to be pretty big. Just like that. Bam. Big old background. And then right as you have this plane selected, go right over here to the material selection, click New. Right here in your base color, bring it all the way down to black. But you can see how light is still interacting with it. Oop. Notice that? Well, the way you stop that is with your specular. Specular is a lot like how light is absorbed and reflected off, but not like roughness, where like that's roughness. This is specular, so bring your specular down to 0, and now it's just completely absorbing everything. We have a black background. You can even make it bigger. Now we have our logo with this big old black background. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna hit the tilde key, which is right above the tab key, and click front. Hopefully that's the front of your logo when you do it. I'm gonna go right over here to the flat shaded view. So again, if it's not that, maybe click left or click right. But hopefully if you hit the tilde key and click front, that's the front of your logo. Now we're gonna hit Shift A and we're going to add a camera. Let's go ahead and pull that out. And then hit 0 to go to your camera view. So you can play with your camera and then hit 0. And then what you can do is hit G, middle click on your mouse, and pull out, just like this. Now this is why it's important to have a mouse with 3D. So G, middle click, drag. Now you have that, and we can go over here to the Eevee preview again, see this weird silhouette. And there you go. That's how we get to this point. Next, we're gonna light it and animate it. All right, so this is the first fun lesson. We're past the kind of the basics, and now we're gonna learn how to take your logo. So what we're gonna do in this lesson is take your logo, export it out at the proper format. We're gonna put it into Blender, we're gonna extrude it, we're gonna bevel it, we're gonna put some materials on it, we're gonna animate it, and we're gonna make it look really awesome, and it's gonna be pretty easy. First thing you need to do is go to your native logo file. Now, it needs to be in a program that can export out vector files. So that would be something like Illustrator, Inkscape, or anything else. There probably is like a converter on your browser as well. But here we have an Adobe Illustrator file with the Happy Editing logo. So what you would do is go to File, and then you go to Save a Copy. And then right up here, I'm gonna go ahead and save this as Smile, which I already have that. And then we're gonna save it, I'm gonna overwrite it, keep all this at default, and we're good to go. So with that being said, let's hop into Blender, and we'll go to File, Import, right up here, File, Import, and we'll use the SVG right there. We'll go to our desktop, we'll find it, and we'll double click it. Now, you may not see anything, it's right there. I'm gonna hit the period key. Fun little trick, fun little trick. So sometimes you can get sidetracked and things could get really gnarly. In your scene, you lose your point of like origin. So what I do is I'll highlight an object that I want to be the center, I'll hit the period key, and then the whole world rotates around it. But notice something, it's really small. Like if I go ahead and I import one of those primitive objects, it's huge compared to my logo. So we need to do two things. We need to center the anchor point. If you're familiar with After Effects, you know all about the anchor point. And we also need to make it proper size. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag right here. And I'm going to hit S and drag my mouse. S, drag my mouse. And then I'm going to click away, click back on it. There we go. It's proper size. And one way you can gauge if something's a pretty good size, of course, you can kind of have a lot of flexibility, is I'm going to hit Shift A. And right here where it says mesh, I'm just going to pick one of these primitives. So the icosphere. So now I can see, oh, my logo is actually kind of big. Something right there. Now I'm hitting S. You can see right there with my mouse. That's about proper size. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that and delete it. So here, now we need to center the anchor point, because if I hit R, here's your shortcut R. If I hit R twice and I move my mouse around, you can see the anchor point is right there. That's this yellow dot. This yellow dot here is your anchor point. So I'm going to hit the tilde key, which is right above the tab key. It's got like the squiggly and the apostrophe looking thing. I'm going to hit that, brings up this menu. And this is where you can pick your views. I'm going to pick top. And that's going to give me a flat top here. So I'm going to click on my logo and I'm going to hit tab. Tab is going to be, if you want to use 3D a bunch, tab here in Blender is a very highly used tool. And if you hit tab, go to edit mode. And I'm going to hit A. So if you hit tab, you'll see none of these are selected. Hit A, and that selects all of our points. So this is like being an illustrator, and you can pick all those points. So I'm just going to, you don't need to follow this part. I'm going to click one. I'm going to hit G. Notice you can actually edit your logo. I'm going to hit A again. I'm using the scroll wheel here. I'm going to hit A again, and then what you'll do is you'll hit G. The shortcut G, or this might actually be more familiar with you. Just go over here and click the move tool, and that's going to do this. But I like to use G. If I use G, it just free moves it. Hit G and use your mouse, or of course you can use that move tool. And centering that anchor point, that orange dot right there. So now, if I hit R twice again, there we have a proper anchor point. We're good. Now let's go into extruding this and all that fun stuff. First, this is kind of tough to look at, this black color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the right, and I'm going to click on this button right here. It's the material button, and I'm going to minimize that. Now we need to go ahead and edit this guy, make him extruded, make him bevel, all that stuff, and I'll explain all that. That's going to be over here, this little green thing. But it's called the data properties, object data properties. So here we're going to go here to geometry, and that's going to where we can actually play with our geometry. We're not really playing with real geometry, but to explain that, you'd get into the way too nitty gritty. But first off, we're going to go here to extrude. Hold down Shift when you do this because SVGs are very finicky. See how it just goes crazy? Because it's not a native Blender thing. So I'm going to hold down Shift when I move this, and it gives me a smooth movement, or you can just type in a numerical value. There we go. I said it wrong. All right, so I'm going to extrude it to right about there. So for me, my extrusion is 0.003, if you want to just copy exactly what I'm doing here. Now we have this edge. Now, one thing happening here is you can see it's kind of raggedy. You can see these little sharp points. What we can do to fix that is you scroll up right here on the object data properties, scroll to the top, you'll see a resolution preview and render U. Bring both of those to 64 to slide them, and now it's going to be perfectly smooth. Because what you can do is you can actually bring that resolution preview down and just wreck Ezra's logo. Now it looks really old style. Like you can put a metallic material, and that's like, oh look, someone handmade it. Fun stuff. Put it at 64, perfectly smooth smiley face. Respect the logo. Now we need to bevel it. Now, if you don't know what beveling is, I'm going to go here to this depth. Right here, it's called bevel. When it comes to 3D, you have basically infinitely sharp edges. This is an infinitely sharp edge. Doesn't look like it, but if it was real and you slid your finger across it, you'd be wide open. So we need to smooth, round out that edge. That's called a bevel. So that's going to be here on the depth. And so I'm going to give it like 0.0001. All right, that's too small. I'll swap the 1 out for a 5. All right, that looks about fair. So 0.0005. Seems like a lot of numbers. That's because SVGs aren't native to Blender. All right, boom. We are here. We've extruded it. We've beveled it. And if you click on it, hit R twice. Look at this. Look at that. Your logo's in Blender. Now we can move on. All right, so we now have our logo, and now we are going to show you how to look at the render preview and add some background to it. So what we're gonna do here is go ahead and apply a material to it. Now over here, we're gonna be using the Eevee render engine. There's a difference between Cycles and Eevee. So if you go over here, you see here on the right-hand side, you'll see this little camera. Click that, it's essentially your camera. And you have two engines, actually three, but really there's just two. So we have Cycles, which I don't think we're touching in this course, we might, but we're using Eevee, which is essentially using an engine that its whole purpose is to make things work as quickly as possible, and in this sense, real time. Cycles is about photorealistic rendering. Eevee is about getting your render optimized as much as possible. There's a completely different look. Eevee, I like to call it the motion graphics engine, just because it works with motion graphics and everything renders super, super quick. So with that being said, let's go over here, click this drop down and click Eevee. And then what you'll need to do is click the check mark on all four of these things here. Now we're gonna go to the Eevee preview. So right up here, you're gonna see these little buttons. This is for your final preview, and we'll get into that. And this is for your Eevee preview. What's great about this button, we'll just go ahead and click it and let it load. So what this does is it throws lights into your scene. If you actually want to see what's lighting your scene, go over here and hit this drop down, and right here on world opacity, just slide that over. This is what's called an HDRI. It's a big, just globe 360 image that is lighting your scene. It's a fun little format. That's what's lighting the scene. I prefer to have my world opacity down all the way. So this is what's lighting your model. All right, so now we're gonna get into lighting this and animating it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just minimize this. We don't need it anymore. And we're gonna go here to the official view for rendering, which is the button right next to the one we've been using. All right, so now we're living here. So we can't really see anything. Of course, we can see this, but can't really see anything. So what we'll do is we'll hit Shift A and go here to Lights. And we're gonna go to the area light right here. And then let's go ahead and give it a power of like 500. Just go ahead and click 500. And then here we have this light. We'll over here to this little yellow icon, and we'll go ahead to the rotation. Looks like Y. So -90 should be pretty good. All right, so we'll do that. And what I'll do is I'm gonna hit S to scale that light up, just like this. And it will make it much more powerful, maybe like a 2000. Boom. All right, now what we'll do is we'll hit Shift D while having this light selected. So go ahead and click on it and hit Shift D, and then hit this red and go all the way over here. We're gonna click on this right here and do -90. So again, click on this little yellow box and then go to -90. So far, I'm gonna hit 0 to get a camera view. So far we have this in our scene. In terms of the material, I think it can be brighter. So click on your smiley face, go over here to the material button, and let's bring the brightness to like half gray. See how that lights it up like that? So we have a lot of power here. So full black is too dark, but we can go slightly above that for the sake of lighting. Now, if I click on my object here, my smiley face, and I hit R twice, notice how it's gonna reflect it like that. So that's really important, that's really cool. Last thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna hit Shift A, and I'm gonna get one more light. I'm gonna get an area light, and I'm gonna bring it up. I'm gonna hit S to scale it up again. And we'll do it maybe like 1000 on the brightness. And then what we wanna do is on these area lights, change them to whatever color you want. So I'm gonna go ahead and just hit R twice so we can see the color here. And then right over here's your outliner. So you go ahead and select whatever you want. We're gonna go with the Happy Editing Orange, boom. And then we could probably do that on the other one as well. Yeah, or we can make it like blue, green. We can actually mix color, but we'll keep it to the happy editing. The whole happy vibe. And then of course, that's gonna stay white, so we can have, you know, a little bit of variation. Again, I'm hitting R twice and moving my mouse around just to preview how this looks. It looks really, really awesome. So now what we're gonna do is rotate this guy around. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click and drag, and that selects all of them. I'm gonna hit 0. So now we have our baseline, and we can now move on to the next lesson. All right, so now that we have the baseline, we're gonna go ahead and animate this. So go here to edit, right over here, and then preferences, and you need to go to animation. So animation right here, and make sure your default interpolation is linear. So essentially, this is an easy ease keyframe. If you're familiar with After Effects or Premiere, right now Bezier is easy ease. We just go to your basic, no speed up, slow down, just stays consistent speed. That's what's important. Now let's go ahead and animate it. So you have your timeline right down here, and you can move it up and down. And this shows how many frames are in your scene. So I'm gonna go with 120. Right over here is where you can change that, and you can see you can middle mouse click right here and move it around, or you can just use this guy. But middle mouse click, you can move it, and then middle mouse scroll makes it bigger and smaller. If you just click and drag, that's gonna be how you select keyframes. Just click right here. All right. So what we're going to do is make a seamless loop. So you have your rotations right over here. You, of course, having that orange thing selected, you can rotate, okay? Again, I click and drag and just hit 0 to 0 it out. And we're gonna pick 2 axes to rotate, but first, this is one of the most important tricks when you're looping things in Blender. In After Effects, I don't believe you have to do this, I've never done it, but you need to go to frame 0. What's gonna happen is if you don't, frame 1 and frame 120 are gonna be the same thing. So when you go ahead and actually make it loop, there's gonna be a 1 frame pause, and it's very noticeable. So what you'll do is you'll click this button here, you'll click this button right here to go to the end, and then hit the back arrow on your keyboard. Now we are at frame 0. Very important. I'm gonna go ahead and pick X and Z. This is just a random selection here. So click that. You can hear my cat jingling around. So click that, and then you click that, right? And then go to the end right there, and then type in 360. And I don't know, negative 360. This is all just fun. And then click that, and you have your keyframes, and you can see them right over here. This was down, so you'll have to go ahead and slide that up, and there we go. Keyframe on 0, keyframe on 120. And we have Mr. Happy Editing just having a good old time. And that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and clear keyframes. I'm gonna try X and Y. So I'm gonna just click and drag. In this case, you can drag. And then click and drag again, 360, click and drag. I like this much better because you get to see the logo. And then what's fun is now we can look at it in the light. So click on this button here for the viewport. And now we have. Now this is kind of quick. If you wanted to slow this down, I'm gonna go ahead and use my scroll wheel to make this smaller. Right over here on end, I'm gonna type in 240. We doubled how long it is. And then you can just click this keyframe and go to the end. Of course, if you can't see your keyframe, it might be scrolled down right over here where you can scroll up. And now if I press play, you can really take in the love. And then we can scroll through and have this massive logo. Concert visuals wise, this is a very simple, very powerful tool. But motion graphics, anything, you can do it. And we have a really cool material. And there we go. Now, I'm gonna show you how to export this. But yeah, if you press play, you can export this. But if you want to zoom in, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either click on your camera right up here in the outliner and hit G and middle click and just straight up move in. Or I'm gonna right click to go back to my original view. Or if you click on the camera, go down here to the camera settings, you can bring that focal length in. And now it's like you have a 129mm lens on this view, and it's very cool. All right, welcome to the next lesson. This is a really fun lesson. We're gonna be taking that logo we made, we're gonna be putting it on a rocky surface, we're gonna be lighting it, we're gonna be making a cool background, and we're gonna be animating a camera to go toward it. It seems like a lot, but we're gonna cut it up in some lessons, and it's gonna be very easy to do, and it's really fun, and you can put your logo in it, text, whatever. It's a very versatile process. With that being said, let's get into it. So, we have our scene right here, just that default blank scene. All right, so let's hit Shift A, Mesh, Plane. I'm gonna hit S and then 5. So that's scaled it by 5 units. I'm gonna hit Control A, apply that scale. Things like Control A, apply scale, I'm just gonna ask you to do them. I'm not gonna explain what they do because there's so much that goes into 3D that I could be constantly explaining nitty gritty things. In this case, just kind of holding your hand and doing it. The best way to describe it is Control A just kind of resets the whole thing rather than thinking it's on a scale of 1, it's actually on a scale of 5. It applies everything to that like that. But there's much more to explain there. So if there's ever a time where like, why doesn't he explain what Control A apply scale does? It sounds maybe cocky, just don't worry about it. If you plan to get into 3D fully, you will eventually understand it. But to make this, you know, a relatively easy to go through course, I just can't explain every single little bitty thing. Just trust me, it's for the best. But I'll do my best to explain as many things that are directly relevant. With that being said, yeah. Control A, apply scale, or you can apply a rotation or location, but we're just doing scale because all we did was scale it up. Now let's hit Tab. Now we have just one big face. We're gonna right click and subdivide it. Right over here, hit this little box, number of cuts, we're gonna do 100. Now, right when we hit subdivide, it automatically added 4 faces. We're at just one big face, now we're at 4 little faces you can see with these cross sections, but we're gonna add 100, so 100. Enter. Bam. That is 100 faces. Very fun. Very complex. Now what we need to do is hit U to unwrap it. Of course, making sure you're in tabs. If you hit tab and went out, hit tab again and hit A to make sure everything is selected. Hit U to unwrap and click unwrap. It's going to take a second. There we go. So if we go up here to the UV editing tab, we can see it's all unwrapped, and I'll explain that later, but this is the double check. It's there. All right, now let's go ahead and build the texture that's going to make this a rocky surface. Right now it's just weird and useless. So let's go ahead and head to ambientcg.com, and what it is 1,702 assets, mostly these image textures that we're going to use. So let's go ahead and click explore all the assets, and then we're going to type in rock. And hit enter. All right, so now we are looking at all of the rocks that are available for us to use. This is the part where you can pick whatever you want. You can if you want to, but you do not have to pick the rock material that I choose. Pick one that stands out to you. If you want to be unique and kind of stand out on your own, I know you're a creative person, you probably want to do that anyway. So this is the part of the course where you can do whatever you want. Pick any of these rocks. They're a ball, they're a sphere right now, but they're flat surfaces. I'm gonna go ahead. Which one do I even want to pick? There's too many to pick. I want one with a good amount of elevation change, but that's not black. We want it to be not too bright, not too dark. I'm gonna go, man, what do I want to pick? Let's go ahead. I'm gonna pick this one. I had my eyes on this one anyway. So there we go. We have this guy. This is the rock that we're going to pick. You know what? No. I don't want it. I don't want that one anymore. Which one do I want? I want a relatively kind of tan, khaki looking one. Ooh, this one looks like it might be promising or annoying. I'm going to go ahead and select this one. This one should be relatively weird enough. So once you have your rock selected, go ahead and click 4K PNG and download that. All right, once it's downloaded, just go ahead and put that zip file wherever you prefer, and I'm just going to go ahead and extract. I'm just going to put them on my desktop. Let's be willy-nilly about it. So these are what it spits out. It gives you a bunch of images. So let me quickly explain a little bit of context about what these images are. So if you go to the one that's called color, this is the color. This is just the RGB of what's going on with that rocky surface. Then it spits out this image. This image is how the computer will see what is being pulled up, what's flat, what's being pushed down, and that's how you can go from a flat surface to like something that does that, where it has topology, it has elevation change. That's how that's going to work. So essentially, and then we have this one, which is going to be really exciting. This one's going to show all the little details, minute details, small details. We can even zoom in here. There we go. You can see, look at all that detail is captured in this image, and we'll be able to harness that for ourselves and use it on a surface. So it has a couple other that will explain what's in there, but it's going to give you all those images. Don't be confused. You downloaded the right thing. Let's pop back into Blender and use that. So let's go here. Right up here is the shading tab. So we're going to use that. I'm going to scroll over here, hit this drop down and turn off world opacity because I don't like it and it hurts my eyes. So having this plane selected, we're going to click new. There we go. If you can't see it, say like it's out of view, just hit the period key. It'll come back. So remember I mentioned the node wrangler. You're going to need it. So go here, go to edit, preferences. If you don't have it enabled, click on the add-on section, type in node, N-O-D-E, and just hit the node wrangler add-on checkbox. With that being said, go ahead and click on the thing that says principled BSDF, and we're going to hit Control T. So what that's going to do is add an image texture, mapping, texture coordinate, and it's going to be plugged into this base color socket. Now remember I mentioned color as one of those images that we downloaded. So let's go ahead and click the open button. I'm going to click on desktop and find the one that says rock 4K color. All right, so now we have our rock in the scene. And what's cool is if you right here on scale, if you click and drag, you can tile it. Look at that. Now, doesn't it look like that you're flying in on Fortnite or something? That's what that is. If you see these repeating patterns in gaming, that's what that is. In gaming, they use one image. It's easy on the computer, but once you're actually on the ground, you can't see the tiling, right? You're just running around the surface, shooting all the enemies. But once you're flying in, you can see it. That's what that is. I'm going to click and drag and type in 1, so we just have that image flat, not duplicated at all. Now let's go ahead. I'm on this rock texture. I'm going to hit Shift D, bring it down, and then get this vector to plug it here. I'm going to explain this because I'm going to have to explain it again later. But what this mapping and texture coordinate node does is it tells the image where to be. Remember how we unwrapped. So here, if we go to the UV editing, remember how I hit U and then we clicked unwrapped and I said I would explain it later. Now I can explain it. So see all these faces, there's 100 of them because we added 100 faces. It maps it. See back there, that's our image. See that? You can kind of see it. It's now saying this being unwrapped. Imagine like a chocolate candy with like that's shaped as Santa Claus and they put the candy wrapper of Santa Claus on top. The Santa Claus wrapper is flat, right? But the Santa Claus chocolate candy is not flat. It's, it's got some elevation and detail to it. So that's what you're doing. You're taking your model and flattening it out and putting an image on it. And to show you an extreme example of how that works, don't follow along with this part. I'm just going to show you. So we have this sphere, right? It's no longer flat. Well, we need to put an image texture on it. How do we flatten this out? Well, Blender makes it easy. If you hit Tab and then you hit U and you click Sphere Projection, look at that. That is a sphere. That's a flat sphere. That's what a sphere looks like as a flat object. Right up here, it gets dodgy, but right here, it's pretty much flat. It's not perfect, but there you go. That's the same thing. So now you can wrap an image on it. That's the way you do it. If you want to use image textures, you have to figure out how to make your model flat so you can put a flat image on top of it and then your model can go back. That's essentially how it works. You don't really need to know this for this course though. This is just sort of training or FYI really. So there we go. We have that. So now let's go back and add more of these textures to the scene. So right here, again, we duplicated this guy. So I'm going to click this number 2. We don't want it to, basically, if you see this number 2, if you add a new image texture to this guy, it's going to add to this guy. These are the same thing. There are instances in a sense. If you click 2, boom, new name, separate node. So let's click on this little file icon and let's get roughness right here, roughness. This is really cool. So let me show you how the light, see how the light interacts here? See how it looks on the surface? Just looks like a piece of paper, like you printed out an image. Watch this. So right here on color space, go to non-color, because this is a black and white image, and plug this color socket into roughness. It's gonna take a second, and boom, look at that. Now, the light is distributed where it needs to be. Remember, if you take this off, it's nothing. You can even play with your roughness and make it more reflective or non-reflective. But if you take this color output, it now tells it how to interact. And that's so cool. That's what I love about 3D. All right, now let's add one more node. Remember that pink purple thing that had all that detail? So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this again by hitting Shift D, place this vector onto the vector. Click that number 2, click this, and let's get one of those. So let's just go ahead and pick this one. Doesn't really matter. Shift A, search, node, sorry, not node, bump. What am I thinking? We're gonna get a bump node. Now it's gonna take all that detail data, go through the bump node, and show us some fake elevation changes. That's what we're doing. We're faking elevation changes so we don't have to add more faces. So let's put the color, actually, yeah, sRGB is correct. So let's get that color, put it into the height, put the normal into the normal of this principled node. All right, now it looks horrible. So right here in distance, go to 0.1 and then bring that strength down a little bit. There we go. Now we have fake detail. Look at this. No detail. Fake detail, right? It's faking it. It's not, we don't actually have to add more faces to displace it, and that may not make any sense to you, but there we go. Now we have a nice little bumpy surface. All right, and so there we go. We've built the material, and we're done with this section. All right, so now that we have this whole thing set up, we need to go ahead and displace this because it's still kind of useless. Still looks weird, you know. So let's make this look more like a rocky surface. So what we need to do is click on your plane here and click right here on this blue wrench icon. That's going to be your modifiers. So let's go ahead and add a modifier. Now, in short, modifiers are different little things that you can apply to your geometry to modify the surface. So in this case, we're going to use a displacement modifier, and that's going to change the elevation of your model, your object. So now that we've had that applied, let's click New, and then we're going to click on this little texture button, and it defaults on your type to image or movie. That's what we want. So we're going to click on Open, and go to your desktop or wherever you saved it, and select your image. All right, now we have our image. The problem is it's duplicating the image 4 times. Remember when I mentioned the UV. So if we go here to our material, look at this here. Notice the UV. Remember I mentioned this UV tells the image where to place itself. Well, the displacement texture going through this modifier is not using UVs, but we can change that. So click on the little blue wrench. We're going to go from normal to UV, and now we have created our rocky surface. Now we have a problem, and that problem is it's kind of low polygon. Remember those 100 faces we created? They're still there. We need more. So how do we add more to the scene? Well, we add a subdivision surface modifier. That's going to add more than we manually added. It adds it with a node, and it's non-destructive. So let's go ahead, add modifier, subdivision surface, and hierarchy. We need to go ahead and bring this above the image. There we go. Now we've made a much sharper thing, and you can bring your viewport levels up to 2 if your computer can handle it. This gets very taxing. I'm going to right click and shade smooth. Looks like it's not even going to make a difference. But there we go. Now if we go back to our image, we can see this. It's kind of ugly on these portions, and that's because it's stretching it too high. We're going to bring our strength to 0.4. So now we've created this. Now you can have a levels viewport of 2 or 1. keep your render at 2. That's going to, when you hit the render button, it'll make it at a strength of 2, but you can keep editing at a viewport of 0. So it can stay really light. It won't tax your scene. But once you hit the render button for the official render, it'll render it out like it's a viewport of 2. Now, if you can handle, if your viewport can handle 2, do it at 2. It's always fun to look at your scene as it would be exported. I'm going to go to 0 just so that my computer doesn't lag on my recording. So now that we've created this part, I'm going to hit the tilde key and go to the front. I'm going to go and add our background. So Shift A, Mesh, Plane, and I'm going to hit RX90. We're going to move it back just right next to the scene. I'm going to hit the period key so we can center out our view. And then let's go here to, I'm going to scale it up to something like this, and then I'm going to bring it up some. Let's get the scale tool and scale it out. We want it to go farther out because I think we're going to duplicate this here if my knowledge serves me right. So scale it out like that and then hit Control A and apply that scale. Now we are going to go ahead and build a material from scratch using nodes. If you've never used nodes before, that you can either love them or absolutely hate them. It's like creative coding in a sense, but I personally absolutely love it. But we're gonna make a very simple one. Don't worry about it's not gonna be too confusing, I promise. So let's click on the shading button and let's click the button right here that says new. And then I'm gonna hit the period key, bring it over now that we can see this. Let's go ahead and delete the principled. Just say goodbye. Let's get so Shift A, search, mix shader. Right there, plug it into the surface. And then let's get an emissive, EMI, emission node. So let's put the white one here. Let's go ahead and duplicate this node, Shift D. Let's click on it, make it black, and make the strength 0, and plug this one to the top. So here's what we're doing. We use this mix shader so we can have 2 shaders. This is a shader node. This is a shader node. Both of them are emission nodes, meaning you can make them bright. See that? Starting to glow. That's what an emission node does. But we have 2 of them. And this factor, if you bring it to the left, it only shows this emission node. If you bring it all the way to the right, it's only showing this emission node. But if you bring it anywhere between 0, so right now it's a factor of 1 or 0. If you bring it in between, it's mixing them together. And that's powerful because if you use this socket, you can plug a texture in, and it'll tell where you want those 2 shaders to exist on your geometry. In this case, we're going to create a gradient. So Shift A, search, color ramp. So it's just COL, plug that here. Let's get a gradient node. So Shift A, search, GRA, gradient texture, plug the color into the color ramp's factor. And then remember, with that Node Wrangler add-on enabled, hit Control T, and we're going to use the object coordinate. It's a generalized coordinate. It's almost a guess. But that's so that we don't have to UV unwrap. It really doesn't matter with the gradient texture. Now we have this. We need to go ahead and rotate this gradient. So I think it's going to be a rotate on the Z, 90 degrees. Yeah. So right here on the Z of this mapping node tells the texture where to be. Now you might be thinking, we just made a gradient. That was so much effort for just a gradient. So this is going to be a common theme in 3D where simple things take longer than they should to make. The reason being, 3D enables you to make extremely complex things. For example, in this the real-time materials add-on right here, for example, let's say wood right here. That wood material has a lot of nodes. It's like, I don't know, like 30 of these things connected, intertwined. So because of that, simple processes require way more effort because you're using the basic building blocks that will allow you to make insane things. Unlike, say, in Photoshop or Illustrator, where it's built to make more simple things and you can go crazy from there. With Blender, you can make even more crazy things. The only pitfall is simple things take a little bit longer. That's pretty much it. That's why it takes so long to do this, because you can do way more, which I think is very exciting. So that's how you create a gradient. Now we need to make this much smoother. This is way too hard of a gradient. So right here on the color ramp, go from linear to B spline, and that's going to give you a really smooth gradient. You can see right there. So I'm going to bring it to right about there. It's really finicky. It can be kind of weird. See, if you bring it here, you can start to see an edge, and here you can start to see a weird edge. So try to find that middle ground, which is right above the middle point for me. Makes it a little bit softer, but that enables you to go here to the scale, I believe, of the Z. Oh no, sorry, the Y. The scale of the Y, and bring it down, and then the X here on the location. And now you really get a very soft gradient using the mapping node. So there we go. And then we can go ahead on the emission node, make it slightly blue and a lot brighter. And there we are. We have our gradient background. We have our rocky terrain, and we're done with this section. Hoorah! Let's head on and add our logo and lighting and camera and all the other crazy stuff. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the flat view. We have our scene here. What I want to do is show you what I like to do when I'm importing logos into a scene that require a little bit of maintenance before throwing them into a scene. And I like to call it staging your logo. So right over here, I'm going to right click and get a new instance of Blender, which is something that I love about Blender. You can work in 2 separate Blender instances, and it's cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull in our logo, we're going to rebuild it, and stage it here and import it into Blender. It's like, what's it, like appending? Is that, do we call that in Photoshop? Or like, oh, it's linked or whatever, append linked. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and import SVG. So we're just going to repeat that process we did in lesson number 2 with the logo. So let's go ahead and import that SVG. Then I'm going to highlight it, hit S and scale it up. At this point, you can just eyeball it because it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the tilde key to go to the top and click top. Then I'm going to hit tab to go to edit mode, hit A to select it, select everything. I'm going to hit G. Notice our anchor point is right there. I'm going to hit G and move it to like the nose area. Right there. Okay. Now we can go ahead and extrude this. So click on the little wire icon, whatever, geometry, holding down shift, of course, with the extrude because it's sensitive. Right about there. And then on depth, 0.0005 is about appropriate. Here we go. And then we have this default black matte. So let's go ahead to the material button and delete it. There we go. We have our logo. Now we're going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to call this the logo. Right there. And save. Now this is something I do when I do concert visuals for clients or just logo animations in general. I'll get their logo and then I'll extrude it, do what we need to do to make it 3D, and then I'll just save that file. I won't add a material to it. I won't edit the surface. I'll just make it 3D and I'll save that. And so in all the new files that I'm creating with that logo, I just go ahead and append it from that. So I don't have to keep re-extruding it, redoing it, all that stuff. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you here. And then what we can do is just go ahead back here and throw it into this scene. And we're going to be doing this later with a model of a car. We're going to be staging an entire car model and throwing it into a scene. So this is sort of like the basic before the complex. So we'll go to File and then go click on Append right here in the desktop. It'll show you. There's the logo. Click that, and then right up here you'll see this file that says Object and then Curve. This was called Curve, and you can retitle it. If we go back here, you can just double click there. There we go, and you can rename it if you want, but it doesn't matter. There we go. We have our object, and I think if I just hit RX90, yeah, it will work just fine. And then I'm gonna hit S and scale it down slightly, and then we'll just go ahead and bring it up. And then I'm going to hit R twice and just rotate it so it looks kind of fun. There we go. And then I'm going to click that and hit the period key. So now that whole scene is revolving around this face. There we go. We're ready. Let's click on the render preview button. We have this. Let's go ahead and add a super basic material to this. So we just want a basic metallic material. So we'll click on this model. See how it's highlighted. We'll click on the material button down here. Click New, and then we'll go to Metallic and make it a little bit darker. And you can make it even less rough. You can make it a mirror if you want to, but we don't want to do that because no light would reflect off of it. All right, boom, we have this. Now let's go ahead and light it really quick. We are going to be using cycles for the lighting portion of this course. So this is the portion of the course where I'm going to warn you, if your computer can't handle this section, you can use the alternate render engine, which I'll show you. So cycles, there's 2 render engines that come with Blender by default. Really, there's 3. I think I already mentioned this, but right here, Eevee, cycles. Eevee is what we're looking at right now. Eevee is what Blender uses as your material preview section right up here. Eevee is all about speed. I think I did mention this, but I'm gonna repeat it. It's all about speed, making things viewable real time. There's no lag, whatever. Now, if we go to cycles, I'm gonna replicate this whole thing as cycles, and I'm just gonna add in that HDRI. You don't need to follow along to this section. This is cycles. It doesn't look photorealistic right now. It's because there's not enough things in play to make it look real. But it is essentially calculating light balances, calculating everything to real world. If this was happening in real world, this is what it would look like. But it also is heavier on your computer. Your computer should be able to handle it, first off. Especially if you're using a PC with a GPU, you have nothing to worry about. If you're using a Mac, you probably only have a CPU. If you have a GPU, great. I can't remember if those GPUs are compatible with Blender. They probably are by now. There was a long time where Blender and Mac did not have the greatest relationship. Now they're good. So just to keep in mind, if you don't want, if cycles is too heavy for your computer, you can go over here, click on the camera icon, go from cycles to Eevee, and you can follow along. The only difference is your lighting is going to look different, your render is going to look different, but you'll have something to work with. And even though it may not look as good as the cycles version, I use Eevee all the time. I created a motion graphics course completely in Eevee. So Eevee is, I call it the motion graphics engine. But with stuff like this, you typically want to use cycles because you want it to look photoreal. Regardless, you can follow along with Eevee, but if it looks different, don't worry, it's going to look different. With that being said, let's switch back over here to cycles. And here we go. This is what you should see in cycles. Looks pretty cool, right? Now I'm gonna click on this little world icon and bring that all the way down to black. So this is what we're dancing with. Look at that, look how cool that looks. And if you wanna go ahead, I'm gonna bring my levels viewport to 2. Look how gnarly that is. I'm gonna go back to 0. Okay, let's add a light to illuminate our smiley happy editing logo. So with that, let's go ahead and hit Shift A, light, spotlight, and then you can see it right here. I'm gonna hit S to scale it down because it's always way too big. I'm gonna hit G to bring it up, right here. Hit G to bring it over. I'm gonna hit Shift and middle click to kind of move around, G, and then R twice to point it directly at the logo. And thank goodness for these lines so you know exactly what it's pointing at. All right, now I'm gonna click on the logo, hit the period key to bring it down. I'm gonna click back on the light, or you can just click on it here in the outliner. Click on the little green bulb, that's where you can find your settings, and give it a power of 10,000. You really have to go crazy with these. All right, now bring your radius to 0 so we can see exactly where this curve is hitting. And then let's bring that spot size down. We really want to get cookie cutter with this. So I'm hitting R twice on the light, or you can go up here to have better control of where that circle is. And then let's go ahead and bring that spot size back up, and then bring that radius to smooth out the spotlight. Boom. And then we need to make it the same blue as this background. In this case, you can just eyeball it. There we go. We have the same blue. All right. And then maybe 20,000 on the brightness. All right. So what we're going to do in the animation is actually animate this spot size. So it's going to start at nothing, at 1, and then animate open. So that's going to be part of the animation. That's why we use the spotlight. It has that really cool spot size feature. But now we have a lit up scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this plane. I'm going to hit Alt D. That's going to make an instance of this. Don't hit Shift D, hit Alt D. That creates an instance instead of just a duplicate. And then let's bring it over here. click on this guy, hit Alt-D, bring it over here, and then click on this guy, hit Alt-D again, and bring it over here. All right, so now we have this whole scene ready, and we're gonna bring our camera and just have our camera go right this direction. But now that we're done with that, let's head on into the camera and animation section. All right, so this is the portion where we're gonna set up our logo. Now, one thing I wanna mention, notice how this is seamless. This is the value of using image textures. See how I duplicated it, but all of these features work with each other. So once you render it, it's almost impossible to make out the part that you duplicated. See, if we go here to the material preview, you can kind of see the cracks where I opened it. And in that case, you just move it over. Just move it over a little bit. This is not rocket science. Move it over. And look at that. A seamless floor just from duplicating it. That's the value of image textures. All right. With that being said, let's go ahead and add our camera. So I'm going to hit the tilde key and go to the front, Shift A, camera. So what's interesting about that is if I go ahead, the reason why I had you click the front button is because if I say I'm going to point my viewport here, I'm going to add a camera. The new camera is pointed that direction. So it's important. Let's go ahead and click on that camera. Make sure you have the move tool selected. I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to bring it back and use the 0 button to go to the view. So for me, I like a 35mm lens. So 35mm, and then we can look at how that looks here in cycles. Looks pretty nice. I'm gonna go ahead and bring my gradient up a little bit, but you can't see the edge. And here's how you move your camera. You hit G and mouse middle click, and you can move back and forth, which is really cool. I'll just go to the flat view here. G and then middle click, you can move it back and forth. That's how you can preview the animation. So it's pretty cool in that sense. So we can go all the way to the back until you start to see the edge of our geometry. So something like this. And then I'm gonna hit G and move my camera closer to the ground. And then maybe make my camera look up a little bit. So then when we animate it, we're going to be going forward, or you can just use the Y location. But look at that. Look how cool that is. Now, if you want to see how this looks in the final render, just go here to render image, and it'll start rendering out what the final image will look like. So for me, this is how it's looking. And I'll explain samples and all that. This is what it looks like for me. It may look different for you, but that's okay. It's okay if it looks different. With that being said, we have our camera set up, and I'm gonna go and bring my camera to like right. In fact, I think this smiley face needs to be bigger. Logo just needs to be a little bit bigger. So bring this up, and then I'll bring my camera. So I'll click on my camera here, click on this little orange icon, and just 90 degree or whatever. See how that looks. All right, I like it. Here we'll click on the light, or you can click on it here in your outliner and bring your radius higher, or you can just hit R twice and move the light. But now this is the scene that we're working with. And then of course, we can also bring that gradient up a little bit. Nice. All right. Depth of field. So how are we going to do depth of field? So you can click on the camera, click down here on the little camera icon and click depth of field, and then bring that f-stop all the way down. And just in case I missed it, I don't remember, but if you're in the flat view, click this drop down and click on depth of field. And that's going to allow you to view your depth of field without being in the Eevee or Cycles render preview. Just click it here and you can see that you can check your distance. So see how our distance is like right here and then it's moving down the line. So if we zoom in, we can select our distance to be the distance. I went berserk. The distance of our logo. But that's going to create a problem. That problem being when we move our camera, that moves out of distance. How do we track focus? Well, we use an object. I don't want to use this whole object because it's too big to say, hey, always focus on that object no matter where you're located. It's too big, especially because our logo is going to move. So what we're going to do is use a empty. It's a lot like a null if you use After Effects. So Shift A and empty, plane axis, and then I'm going to hit use G, the letter G on the keyboard to position it. I'm going to hit the period key to move it in. To position it to the exact point, which is that little yellow dot, the anchor point, position it to the exact point I want it to focus, which is right around the dead center of the logo. And then you can either leave it in the outliner called empty, or I'm going to double click it and call it focus. I didn't realize that was in all caps, but that's okay. There we go. We've selected where we want the camera to focus. We'll click back on that camera, click on the little green camera icon, and right here in focus object, select focus. I hope I spelled that right. So now, no matter where I am, well, no matter where the camera is, it's going to focus on our object. How nice is that? That's the way we want it to do. And then let's go here to the cycles preview and see how we want our focus to look. That is just too much. The f-stop is crazy. So click on your camera, click back on that little green camera icon, and bring your f-stop to 3 or 4 or 5. Something like this. So play with that f-stop till you are comfortable with the amount of blurriness in your scene. Now we're ready, and we are done with the camera portion of this lesson. All right, so now we are ready to animate this and render it out. With that being said, let's do it. All right, so first thing we want to do is animate our camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the camera, go to this orange transform section, and we are going to be animating the Y. So we're going to decide how far back you want to start. And I'm going to click on the render button. I want to see how this looks when I'm far back. So the logo is pretty small. I don't want it to be crazy movement. I just want to have a little forward movement. So we're going to start this far back. So we'll do that. Now let's make sure our interpolation is right. So we'll go to Edit, Preferences, and we'll go to the Animation tab. So click on Animation, Default Interpolation, make it Bezier. It's an easy ease keyframe if you're an After Effects guy. So now we've set up our easy ease. Let's go ahead and get our camera, and hopefully you can't hear my neighbor's dog barking. All right, so this Y. So I'm gonna go ahead and just click this keyframe button here. Did that sound Southern? I think I said that with a Southern accent. I don't know. Keyframe button. All right, so what I like to do is I just like to press play and imagine how long I want this to take. Okay, so it looks like maybe to frame 72. And then let's just bring it forward however far forward we want it to be. Let's do something like this. We want it to be pretty prominent. And click. So now, if we go back, let's press play. There we go. That's our animation. Now let's add another level of animation. So that's going to be our Y rotation. So right here. So we're going to start here. Click that, and we'll go all the way to frame maybe here. We want it to center out quicker. And then 0. Click that. And then now let's press play. Nice. What if we did make it center at this? All right, let's see. Let's press play. It's a little laggy, but that's okay. Okay, that's about right. I like it. Let's make this a little bit longer. Let's press play. Awesome. Let's make the rotation. Let's make the rotation meet it. There we go. All right. Cool. And then let's leave the logo alone, but you can animate the logo too. Maybe animate the logo. Yeah, it looks like he's rolling in. But I'm going to leave the logo. I'm going to leave the logo alone. Typically, maybe I wouldn't, but I think in this one I do. All right, so now let's go to the render view and let's animate the light. So click on your spotlight, click on the little spotlight icon here, and make your spot size Oops, what had happened? I click 0 to go back to my camera view. So click on the spotlight right here on spot size 0, which will stop at 1. So that's what we want. So let's click here to keyframe that, and let's make it up to frame 20, and then bring that spot size up to however wide you want that spot to be. Looks like 16.1 for me. I like that. And then let's actually, so I'm scaling it up, and then I need to actually go back up here. Okay, scaling it up. I actually want to go ahead and get these keyframes to initiate at frame 10. I don't want the spotlight to start immediately. I want you to kind of appreciate the silhouette of the logo. So if we press play now, there we are. Okay, cool. It's hard to see. That's just because we're working with cycles. But now the light goes right above the logo. It's hard to visualize, but you'll see it in the final export. So look like we'll go from frame 10 to frame 30. That's what I had my spotlight animate in. So it starts here, ends like that. And we're done. So let's go ahead and see it, how long we want the full extension of the animation to go. So let's just go ahead and press play. It comes in, it settles out. Let's go ahead and bring this all the way to 4 and let it sit for a second. So it looks like 110 frames. That's how long we want the scene to be. So right over here, end 110. Now I forgot that I actually did animate the logo. I didn't just animate everything else. So let's go ahead and make this guy. So let's see. Let's go ahead and have the logo animate, the logo animation stop at frame 30. So we're going to go animate it in reverse. So we're going to start where we want the animation to stop. We can start here and just go ahead on rotation and select all of them and just click and drag. Okay. And then start over here, and I'm going to hit R twice. I want the logo to be kind of flat like this. And then click and drag. And so now what that's going to do is animate the logo into where we want it to be. So like I said, animating it in reverse. So now let's press play. Very cool. And we can even extend that. All right, cool. I wonder if it's the depth of field that's lagging my animation. Let's do it again. Not really. Cool. That's cool. And you can pad that, make it longer, make it shorter. Press play. And you can also go in and edit. It's like the graph editor. I'm not going to show you that because that's more an advanced thing. We can do that in a later course. But we've created this wonderful animation. And we're done. That is it. And if you want to see what this final render looks like as just one image, you can go up and hit the render image button and just watch it render through. So for me, this is how my image looks. It's awesome. I love it. This is one of my favorite designs I've done for a course, and it's just really nice to look at. So there we go. We're done. So what you're going to want to do, this is a cycles render. The last render we did with the logo just rotating, that was an Eevee. Super quick render. If you rendered it, you would have saw it pretty quick. This is going to take much, much longer. If this is your first introduction to 3D, welcome to the world of way too long render times. Unless you have a render farm, I'm working with a RTX 3090. My render time isn't going to be that crazy, but still longer than I want it to be because we're rendering photorealistic. We're rendering with a photorealistic render engine. We're really not stretching it fully. So like I said, if you got that project file I gave you, these light bounces right here are going to be 1. So I've already kind of optimized it for you. So with that being said, here's how you set up, you export for a cycles, really long cycles render. We're going to do a PNG sequence. So we're gonna stick to 24 frames a second because I like how cinematic that looks, but you can change it. You can change whatever you want. Right over here, we're going to set up a file for it. So go here to the desktop, new file, and call it HE animation. Happy editing. You can hear my cat. My cat has the zoomies right now. Happy editing logo, HE animation, and accept. And then just leave it at a PNG sequence. You're totally done. We're already done. And all you have to do is click render, right here, render animation. And when you're done, compile the PNG sequence, which if you don't know how to do that, let me show you how to do that. We're going to open up Premiere. So right here. All right, so here is the export for the original animation I created for the course. So I exported it out. Looks like for me, it was 150 frames. So in that file, I called landscape. So right here, landscape, exported all my files into that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click the first one and then just click this image sequence button and open. So that's going to import and compile those at 24 frames a second. And there we have, and then you just drag it into your Premiere timeline and you have your animation all set and ready to go. And I'll press play. It's probably going to lag. There we go. No, it didn't lag. But that's what your animation is going to look like. It's got a process, but there we go. That's how your animation is going to look. Use a different material here. But that's it. That's how you do it. This lesson is it. That's it. We're done. We're on to the next one. But this one was kind of hefty, but it was fun. It was cool, and I hope you liked it. And we can now move on to the next lesson. All right, so we are now at the last lesson. This one's really fun. So we're gonna be creating like a big LED screen. We're gonna be putting a video on it. We're gonna be putting a model of a car in front of that, kind of take it around in a circular motion, have some fun. So we're gonna learn some camera rigging, how to put video on real geometry in Blender. Having a lot of fun, so let's dive into that. So we are here in a blank scene, just like we always should be. And let's go ahead and just start our screen. The first section is about how to create a screen, how to put video on that screen. So let's Shift A and get a plane. Now let's go ahead and scale it. So now we have this guy. Let's go ahead to the transform settings, and looks like we need to go 9. So it looks like we should go about 9, actually no, 16 here, and 9 on the Z. Oops, sorry. 9 on the Y, 16 by 9, or whatever the aspect ratio of the video you want to apply to geometry, create that there. Now it's huge. If you just put in a cube, we can see that. So let's go ahead and bring it down to an appropriate size. Oops, I deleted both of them. Appropriate size, and then let's go ahead, Control A, apply scale. So how do we add video to this? We need to unwrap it, like we mentioned. So very, very important. Hit the tilde key right above the tab key. Hit top. So there we go. Oops. Let's go back. And then we need to go tab. Make sure everything is selected. Hit A just to make sure. I'm going to hit U for unwrap. In this case, we're going to do project from view. Basically, whatever we can see, that's what's going to get unwrapped. That's what's going to be flat. So with that being said, let's just click project from view and we're good. Now let's just leave that there and let's head over and add the video to this plane, but we're not quite finished. So let's hit on the shading tab and there we go. Of course, my preference, killing that world opacity. So now we have this. Let's click new. We can see that principle, but of course, if it's out of view, just hit the period key or just find it by middle clicking. All right, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll delete that principled and get an emission node. So Shift A, search emission, and plug that into the surface. And then again, with that Node Wrangler add-on enabled, hit Control T. Let me move it over with G. And let's go ahead and click open. Now we're gonna use a video. Use whatever video you have, but you need to know how many frames long that video is. You can actually go into Premiere and you can look at it. It'd be nice if you can just right click and look at it, but you can't, at least not on PC. But it's very important to know how many frames long your animation is. In my case, I just have this random video on my desktop and the export conveniently tells me it's got 250 frames. So I'm just gonna go ahead and open that. So now we have this. Notice this looks wrong. So what we need to do is go to the UV editing tab and look at what we have. This craziness. So you can see, if I go ahead and highlight it, you can see it projected it weird. I don't know why. In fact, I'm going to do one more projection. So I'm going to hit the tilde key, go to the top. I'm going to make sure you're in tab, hit U and project from view. Now it should work right. So now if I just come in here, click and drag, and I hit S, you should just be able to scale it up. So for some strange reason, when I projected it, it was like that. I don't know why it was like that. But again, if you just come over here, hit U, project from view, it's going to give you that 16:9. And then go ahead and scale it up with the S short key for scale. So hitting S, just like that. There we go. Now it's going to project properly. If we go back to the shading workspace, boom, look at that. Look how nice. And you can make it brighter. Of course, that clearly damages it, but that's cool. Now, remembering that we have 250 frames to work with, turn on cyclic, so that'll loop the video. Turn on auto refresh, so that'll allow it to play. Frames, we have 250, and start. You can actually pick what start frame. So maybe, hey, we want it to be on frame 5. It's switched over to frame 5, but we want it to start on frame 1. And then if I press play, look at this. We got my little video playing away, and yours can play too. Now, same thing works if you just want to make it an image. We can go ahead and just find an image. Thumbnail for a tutorial, bam. Now it's just an image. So all of this works. All of this is fun. Frames 250. All right, boom. We have that. So that is how you apply video to that. Of course, I'm just going to take that off. So for the remainder of this lesson, we're going to make it a nice orange and nice and bright. Not a big fan of this. Something like that. Cool. All right. So that is it for this section. All right. So now that we have our LED screen thing, let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the scene. So first, take this guy. I'm going to hit RX90 Shift A. And let's get a plane. I'm going to hit S8. It's going to scale it by 8. Let's go ahead and take this guy and scale him down. I'm going to go right over here to the move tool, bring it over, bring it up. There we go. Now our screen is in the scene. That kind of rhymed. Let's go ahead and add a material to this floor. I'm going to hit Control A and apply scale just in case I forgot. I'm going to hit the letter N. We'll go to the real-time materials and find surfaces. And let's go over here. I'm going to go ahead and pick surface 13. That one should be fun. Actually, no. We need a generic one. Let's add this one. Ooh, this one's actually kind of... Sorry, I'm all over the place. Let's go ahead and pick surface 6 and apply that. All right, so now we have this. I'm going to go ahead and edit this surface a little bit. So let's go to this button. Let's go ahead and bring roughness scale to 1. Just make it nice and big. And then pattern scale, make it like 50. Actually, no, keep that pattern scale pretty high. Make it look like a ground. And then here on roughness, bring this both of them all the way down just to see how we feel. And then just kind of bring one of them up. Maybe bring one of them up like this. Bring one of these down. All right, that looks about right. We can live with this. So now that we're here, there's going to be a project file called car. Now specifically, that project file is coming from here. It is coming from Blend Swap. It is a CC0 public domain model. So in case you want to use it in other projects, you can. So I've already staged this model for you. In fact, it was pretty much staged from the get-go when I downloaded it. But what's something important to note is all the separate objects are parented to the shell, the main body, which I guess you can call it the shell. I'm gonna hit G, so you can move it around. It is move aroundable, if that's a word. It's not. So you have this here. So I just wanted you to open it up to see it's already staged. In fact, for me, I'm gonna hit the tilde key and go to the front. I want those tires to sit on this red line. Something I forgot to do. So there we go, because that is now going to be sitting perfectly on the plane when we go ahead and import it. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that. We're going to close this out because it's already done and staged. We're going to go here to our main file, go to File, Append, and then I'm going to go to the desktop where I saved mine, car, and then right here in Object, double click that, click it, hit A to select everything. So I did that way too quick. Right here, go to Object once you append it. Just click one, hit A, and then hit Enter. It's going to take a second to import all those objects. It can be kind of heavy sometimes. This one's pretty light, though. It's a pretty light model. And then you can just take it and scale it down. I just went to the front view, hitting the tilde key. I feel like we did that a bunch. All right, let's see, we'll do that. We'll scale it down a little bit more. So I'm just using the tilde key and I'm using G. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's get this move tool, move it over here. I'm gonna hit the tilde key again. I'm gonna hit R and rotate the car like this. Just move it around in front of your screen. And by the time you're done, you're gonna have a cool thing. I'm gonna go ahead and bring this right down to the surface. Boom. Now we're done and ready. We'll go to the material preview just to see what we're working with. So once you go to material preview, it's gotta load in all of the materials that the car came with. So just let it work. We're using Eevee, which takes a longer time for materials to calculate and all that fun stuff. And you can buy new hardware if you want that to go quicker. For anybody curious, you can always speed this stuff up. You want to see my cat? Come on. Come on. There she is. We got her. This is Cindy. She's been on my lap for like half of this entire course. In case y'all were wondering, you weren't because you didn't hear. Onward to the rest of this lesson. All right, now we're ready to add some fog, add some lights, just make this look super cool. And depending on what you're working with, I'm going to show you how to use it in both render engines so your computer can handle one of them. All right, so what we're going to do first is we're going to click on, what are we in, cycles right now? Let's go ahead and actually, now that we're in this Eevee preview, I'm going to hit this drop down and click Scene World, Scene Lights. So that's going to be as if you're in the main render, but you're using Eevee. If we go here to cycles, this is how it's going to look in cycles. This is how it's going to look in Eevee. Pretty close because there's not a lot going on. Let's click on the world icon right over here. Let's go from gray all the way down to black. And that is how we're looking. It's really cool. It's fun. It's easy. And just for the heck of it, you don't need to follow on this part. If we go back to shading, let's plug that back in. And then maybe go strength of 1. Look at this. You can just kind of make out the silhouette of the car because of the reflections. It's kind of cool. Or we can just go to regular color, which is really cool as well. Whatever you want. This is just a light, the big light in a sense. What we need to do now is add some volume to this to make it look cool. Volume is another word for fog. So here in the world icon, what you'll do is go here to hit this drop down, go from volume to principled volume. All these are different shaders, principled volume. And that, once it enacts, is going to take everything away. And so we'll do a density of 0.1, and then it still doesn't show anything because we are using Eevee. So if we go here to cycles, we can see how this actually will look. So now you can see here in cycles, there's this nice foggy look to it. And that's the difference between Eevee and cycles. Because Eevee is cutting corners, it's not going to recognize, only lights are going to be recognized. So if I hit Shift A and I get a light and I get a point light, where is it at? Right over here. So I'm just going to make it really bright. So if you want to take your point light, go over here to the bulb, make it really bright, and then I'm going to hit G. I'm actually going to move it behind the screen. Actually move it here to the corner. And then it's Eevee, so it's gonna look funny, but it's really about what your computer can handle. And then let's just make it a nice blue. So now you have fog. And if we go here to cycles, it's gonna look different, of course. It's gonna look as if this was photorealistic, as if we had a massive, just emissive thing in our scene. So that's how we're gonna do that here. So we've created fog and we've added a point light. Let's give the power like 2000. You can do that. You can do that if you want to. So that's an object. Take a point light or take an area light of the lights that we've used, put them in the scene. Of course, I like it without. Just looks cooler without. What we need to do now is model some chords coming out of the screen. So what we can do here is I'm going to go ahead and take this guy here and I'm going to Shift D. I'm going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to shrink it. So I'm going to go here to the scale tool and make it small like this. And then I'm going to go here, click on the little blue wrench right over here, add modifier, solidify. And then that on the thickness, go back to the move tool, put it right in the middle, and then let's go all the way down to the floor, just like that. So that adds a little bit of a base. Then we'll go back to the scale tool, stretch it out a little bit. So that adds a little bit of a base to the LED screen so that wires can come out and it makes sense in the silhouette. So the way we make wires is we hit Shift A, go up here to curve, and go here to path. So this is our path. Hit the period key. This is our path. So what you can do is you can hit tab and then click one. We'll go here to the move tool and just move it. And take this right here and move it. And if we just bring it up, there we go. We've now modified this and move it. And then say, hey, I don't like how few editables there are. So what you could do is I can click this one, hold down shift, click this one, right click and subdivide. And now there's another one. We've created one in the middle. So now we can have much more custom editables. I'm just going to keep calling them editables because that's funny. Sounds funny to me. Now you can make this wire, but like it's gone. You can't, if we were to render this, nothing would show up. So what you have to do is go here to the wire chord settings, just like we did with the logo. Go here to geometry, and then on depth, just holding down shift, slide it up, and look at that. That's a wire. That's a cord, whatever you want to call it. So let's go ahead and attach them to our LED screen. So Shift A, curve, path, and then we're just going to go ahead. I'm going to hit the tilde key, go to the top, and I'm just going to hit R and rotate it. And then I'm just going to hit G and move it over here so it touches. We want it to touch this thing and maybe scale it up a little. I'm not sure where the camera is going to be able to see what. So just bring it till this thing is touching right here. And then let's go ahead and add the depth to the wire and edit it. So let's go ahead and just pick some stuff and make it look like a wire. And of course, I'm just going to hit A, right click, subdivide, and that's going to subdivide it all the way down the line. And then you can just go ahead and edit this wire to your heart's desire. Then hit Shift D, right click, and then just drag it over, change it again, change it again. You don't want them to look the same. That would make you look like an amateur. And you're not an amateur. So do that and add as many wires as you want to this scene. And then we'll start the next lesson once you're done just manipulating your wires and making them look cool. All right, we're back. I didn't add a whole lot of chords. You can add as many chords as you want. I just did a few just to show you how that works. Now, I neglected to show you to add materials to it. So I'm going to go to this preview here and add our scene lights back in it. What you can do is just go ahead and make them metallic. So you can click one, if it'll work. There we go. Click one, go to this material thing, material button, click new, and then you can make it metallic and darker. And then what you can do is you can just click this guy, hit this drop down, and then what is this? What's this material called? We'll call it cord. Hope that's how you spell that. So then we'll click on this guy here, hit this drop down and pick cord. Same thing, and pick cord. There we go. We have our cords connected to our frame, and then we'll also put that cord material on the frame as well. So here, there we go. Now there's some context there. So, my other cat has joined us. This one's name is, this is the little one. Her name is Darby. All right. No more distractions. They sit in my lap almost every time I record. So in case you watch my YouTube channel, just think that. All right. So we have everything going on here. Let's create a camera rig. So what we're going to do is, like I said, create a camera rig. So first off, let's get our camera right here. He's just pointing down to the ground. It doesn't matter. Now let's go ahead and get a curve, circle, And let's get one more object. Actually, we'll get that. We'll get that later. So we need to attach this camera to this circle that we just created. And that's going to be done with constraints. So click on your camera. We're going to go all the way to this weird, wild world of constraints right there. Constraint properties. Add constraint. Follow path. Right here on the target, pick the Bezier circle. I hope I'm saying that right. Is it Bezier? Who knows? So we have the camera, and then right here on offset, now the camera is going to go in a fun little circle. So that means the camera's also parented to this circle. Now we can finally select it. I'm going to hit G. Actually, no, we don't need to hit G. We'll do that in a minute. We'll bring it over here. We'll scale it up, and then we'll bring it up. And then we have a problem. I'm going to click on my camera, just hit R twice. We have a problem. And that problem being, I want this camera to move around this direction, but point at that car the whole time. Look at this. Ready? Uh-oh. It's looking the same direction the whole place. So we need to have the camera just look at one object. We're going to do the same thing we did with focusing, which is getting an empty or a null and having it just point at that empty no matter where the camera's at. So we'll hit Shift A, and we'll get an empty plane axis, and then I'm going to go ahead, bring it over here, make sure you have this move tool enabled. I'm going to click it up, and then just go right there. Doesn't matter. And we'll call this, we'll call it track. Just double click it and call it track. We'll click on this camera here. Make sure you go over to the constraints tab, and then we'll click track 2, and then we'll get track, T-R-A, track. So now check this out. This is pretty fun. If you now on offset, look at that. So if I hit 0 and go to the camera view, and I play with that, look how cool that is. We made a camera rig. Let's go ahead, get that camera, go to the camera settings, and go, I don't even know what millimeter we want. Something like this. And then if you want to move the camera to look up, just do that number. And then let's just go see how it looks in the EV. And then let's just turn the volume off since we're going to be in EV. Okay. And then go back to our camera, go back to our constraints. And look at this. Camera, camera, camera. I prefer cycles, so we'll go to cycles. And then, of course, we can turn that volume back on. We'll do 0.2. And then make the screen brighter. So if we click on that plane, make the screen brighter, it's even brighter. Maybe make it blue. Ooh, we love blue. And then, of course, go back to that camera, go to the constraints, and you can see just how cool this looks. Now, that's how you would animate. Let me show you how to animate, and then we'll just go ahead and do a bunch of angles. I'll show you how to do different angles. That's going to be pretty easy. So if you hear some dinging in the background, it's my cat eating. I hope that's okay. So yeah, let's animate it. Edit, preferences. Make sure you're in Bezier. Won't really matter. You can edit that. So let's start at frame 1, right over here, keyframe, and then we'll go. Let's go to like frame 150, and then we'll start. We'll stop on the other side. And just press play, and that is the animation, and that is how we're looking in cycles. It's so cool and so easy to do. And of course we stopped at around 153, so right here on end, 153, boom, and then it would start over. But that is it. And if we want to see how it looks rendered as an image, we'll just click that, see how the image renders out. How cool is that? We got these chords right here. We have the camera. We just have all this fog. It looks nice. It looks cool. I don't know if fog works on Mac in cycles, but I tested it. It definitely works on Mac in Eevee. So yeah, if we just go to look at that. Now, what about some other angles? It's very easy to get other angles. Just go ahead and get this circle here, and let's go sky high. Look at that. Now we have another angle, and we can just go through the animation with that angle in mind. And then you can go ahead and say, hey, let's zoom my camera in. So you click on the camera, click on the little green camera icon, zoom it in. Let's get that track. come down so our camera's in shot. Look at that. How cool is that? It's so easy to make cool things when you're in the weird, wild, fun world of 3D. And then the last thing we do, because right now we're just having fun at this point. Let's add a light inside here. Shift A, get a light, get a point light, and then I'm gonna hit G and just eyeball it. G, we want it to be in the driver's area. Cool. And then I'm gonna go to the render view. This won't work in Eevee. Well, actually it will. It should work in Eevee. Let's give a power of like 300. And then this thing should be inside. Yeah, it is. It's just our glass needs to be more foggy. Windows. Look how the guy spelled Windows. Isn't that fun? Yeah, so if you click on the car, and go to the little, if you go to the material button and we go here to roughness, you can rough it out just like that. And then we can go back to our point light, which is that one. Let's make it orange. And then make it super bright. Now we have a super bright. Now something's going on there. Right, something's going on there, right? Something weird's happening in there. Now we have some brightness in the car. Let's make it like really bright, like 2000. Now it's gonna start to affect our fog. In that case, make less fog. But that is how we do it. And if you want to see how this looks in a final render, hit the render button. This is how it looks as a final render. With that being said, that wraps it up. Of course, we want to export this out. So let's go ahead and just check that. The export settings are just like the last one with the logo, but I'll repeat them because why not? Click on the little printer icon. Pick your resolution right here, frame rate. Make sure you do create a folder. So I'm going to call this DCAR. Accept. We'll go inside of it. Accept. Make sure it's a PNG sequence, metadata, all that fun stuff. We're done. You just get render animation, and let it render for a while. Especially if you're messing with volume, it's going to take a while. With that being said, we're done with the course. We're all done. I hope this wasn't like a chaotic mess of trying to figure out how to use a new program for you. But I think I did a good job. How about kind of hand-holding you through this process. But it's so fun. It's so cool. I hope this course inspires you to learn more 3D. That's really, I want the biggest takeaway from this. If this is your first time using Blender, if this was frustrating, like, golly, there's so many things, I keep making these little mistakes, I get lost. I know that can happen as a beginner. If you plan to continue with 3D, the headache will eventually go away. Just like learning any new program, this one's just extremely intricate. There's a billion ways to be good at it. Try not to be good at everything at the same time. I'm still learning, and I've been doing this for like 5-6 years. So it's fun. It's awesome. I appreciate you watching this course. Put a lot of time and effort and a lot of love into this, and I'm super happy to have made it. Working with Ezra is fun. So yeah, that's it. That's my sign off. See you guys later. Let me show you how to export this. So what you're going to do, let me just go here to the flat view, doesn't really matter though. You'll see this little printer icon, which is fun. You can pick your frames a second. I'm a big fan of 24. Of course, if we're working with motion graphics or concert visuals, you can pop it over to 29.97, or you can give it a custom one. I wanted to make something with like 10 frames a second once. You can do it. 1920 by 1080, we're happy with that. And right over here, pick your file destination. Now, it will, by default, just give you a PNG sequence. If you're rendering and it takes a long time just to, like, say 5-6 seconds to render one frame, I would recommend doing a PNG sequence just in case Blender crashes. 3D programs have a tendency to crash just as much as an Adobe program does, especially After Effects. So keep that in mind. Now, if you want to roll the dice and be risky, I have a pretty good computer, so I'm not worried about it. I'm going to go here and switch from PNG to FFmpeg video. And then on encoding, go to MP4, output quality, perceptually lossless, render, and you'll click right here, render animation, and you're done. You're all done. Now, I do want to mention one thing that I actually forgot, which was transparency on your background. So I'm going to bring my focal length back here. So if I go to the render view, say, hey, I want this to be transparent. I don't want to use a plain black background. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this plane right here, and I'm just going to hide it. What you can do is click on the camera icon and go down here to film. And then you click on transparent, boom. But in this case, you would have to render it out as a PNG sequence. Otherwise, it won't be transparent. So make sure you use a PNG sequence for this. In this case, you can render this out as a transparent piece. If you like to do ProRes exporting with Blender, Blender does not use ProRes as an export option, but the way to get around that is you export all of your animations out as as a PNG sequence, and then you can run it through After Effects or Premiere and export it out as ProRes. That's what I always do. But with that being said, again, you just hit render animation, and spits all that out, and you're done. Now on to the next lesson, which is even crazier.